Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It's really quite sort of both exciting and daunting to realise that today's webinar has over 2,000 people on it. So I'm trying not to have a moment of anxiety as I sit here in my study in Gloucester, but it's lovely to have you all with us this morning. My name is Sandra Miller, and many of you will know who I am, but my work is heading up the work we do nationally around life events. What that means is that our job is really helping us as a church think about how the experience of weddings, funerals and christenings, but today of course weddings, feels and is experienced by those who come to us, the couples that we meet. It also means that a lot of what we do helps practically to help clergy do this process well, as we'll hear. So today we're going to think about what the new changes on marriage registration mean, and I'm delighted that I'll be helped by Neil Turpin, who is from the faculty office, and he's going to say a little bit more in a moment. I'm going to say a little prayer and then we'll begin and I'll explain how the rest of the programme will work. Loving God, we give you thanks for the gift of this day. Give you thanks for the good news of your love in this season of Easter, when we celebrate that you are risen from the dead. And we give you thanks that we are entrusted to share that good news, to journey alongside couples as they come to us requesting to begin a life of marriage together. Thank you for that great privilege, and help us to hold that in mind and help us to learn well and be wise and good in the way we work with these couples so that they are blessed as they come to be married. In Jesus' name, amen. What we will cover today is we really hope that what we're covering is giving you some reassurance about what's going on. In a moment, I'll hand over to Neil, who will talk a bit about why these changes are happening. Then I'm going to just give us a bit of context about wedding ministry, what we do as a Church of England, the numbers that are involved and so on, very briefly. And really think about what matters to couples in a nutshell. What's been really important to couples about the process that's ahead of them? And then I'm going to take you through 7 steps, just very literally 7 steps that have involved something happening. But most of our time, a good half an hour, we hope, will be given over to you asking questions. And so before I go any further, I'm going to introduce you to Neil, who's going to explain why we're doing these changes right now.
Thank you very much, Sandra. I think the first thing I want to say really is that these changes are being introduced that affect all marriages taking place in England and Wales, not just Anglican weddings. So it's not the GRO deciding that the way the Anglican weddings aren't working. The changes affect every single marriage that's taking place in England and Wales on or after the 4th of May. Due to the unique position of the Church of England and indeed the Church in Wales in being able to issue their own marriage preliminaries, they're introducing 2 complementary systems that will run side by side to ensure that all marriages that take place are registered on a single digital electronic marriage register, which will be operated by the General Register Office, the GRO. So in very simple terms, if the wedding you are conducting is after an ecclesiastical preliminary, so that's if the wedding is being authorised either by banns or by common licence or by Archbishop's special licence, then that wedding will be recorded on a marriage document. If the wedding is taking place after a civil preliminary, and that for the Church of England, the Church of Wales' perspective is generally only where one of the parties to the wedding is currently a non-UK or non-EEA national, and a superintendent registrar certificate is required, then in that event, if it's after a civil preliminary, the marriage is recorded on a marriage schedule, and that will be provided to you pre-populated by the superintendent registrar who issues it. So those are the two documents. The marriage document is used if the wedding is following an ecclesiastical preliminary, and a marriage schedule if it follows a civil preliminary. So why are the changes being introduced? Well, as long ago now as January 2018, the Bishop of St Albans sponsored a registration of marriage bill through the House of Lords, which was primarily designed to allow mothers' names as well as fathers' names to be recorded on the marriage certificate, to correct what he described as a clear and historic injustice and an archaic practice unchanged since Victorian times, when children were seen as a father's property and little or no consideration was given to the mother's role in raising them. So it's against that background that these changes were introduced. Now, that bill also provided for the creation of an electronic marriage register, which is what's now coming into place instead of handwritten registers. Later in 2018, there was you may have seen the Supreme Court decided in a case that was brought by a couple called Steinfeld and Kuyden, who, following the introduction of the Same-Sex Marriage Act, took the government to court because they wanted to enter into an opposite-sex civil partnership. And as a result of those two things, we have been, the government then introduced in March 2019 what is known as the Civil Partnerships, Marriages and Deaths Registration Act 2019. So we've had this sort of background for some time, and we've known these changes were coming into place. Whilst the Bishop of St Albans bill was going through Parliament, there had been a lot of discussions with diocesan registrars and archdeacons over the process. So we haven't been left without any consultation. Obviously, a long time, nearly 2 years now has passed since that Act came into force, and the regulations now were laid before Parliament in March of this year, and they come into force on the 4th of May. As I said at the beginning, the changes affect every single marriage that takes place in England and Wales. So it's not just the Church of England that's had to get used to these changes in quite a short period since the regulations were laid. All civil celebrants, non-Anglican clergy, all and officiants from other faiths have all had to get to grips with a change to the way marriages are going to be registered. So that's really the background as to why the changes are happening. So just in very brief summary, with effect from the 4th of May, marriage registers are going to be withdrawn, the current marriage registers, and you will be contacted by your local superintendent registrar to make arrangements to return those registers. And the marriage certificates will no longer be issued by clergy at the wedding, and indeed they won't be issued by registrars attending weddings at civil venues either. A couple will have to arrange to obtain a copy of their marriage certificate from the civil registrar's office once the marriage document or the marriage schedule has been lodged with them. So that's, I think, probably all I want to say about the background and what's changing. Obviously, we'll deal with questions at the end, but I think that really, as I say, is what I just wanted to cover as to the reason really for the backgrounds and a bit of background. And
thanks, Neil. I'm sure there will be some more questions. Hopefully, now I'll go through now and unpack what that looks like in practice. But first of all, I'm going to begin with a little chart that we use quite a lot in the life events work. I can call it all sorts of things. I've had it today, doing things well. What this is about is the fact that when we meet a couple, and everything we do tends to start with where the people we meet are at, the couple. They come to us, and this is nothing to do with these changes, just every time we meet them with fear and anxiety. And in order to move them to that place where they trust us and they're looking forward to what's happening with delight, and they discover something of God's delight in them as well, there are two axes that we work on. One we call the process or transactional axis, and one we call the warmth and relational axis. And both of these have to be done well for the wedding to be a good experience for the couple. We need to do good administrative processes, to do them right and to do them well, so that people's fear and anxiety is reassured and they have confidence in what is going to happen. But equally, we need to make sure that we do these things with warmth and relationship, so that they come to think that we're on this journey with them. Actually, it's a really good model for almost any situation we're in, including the changes that we're facing at the moment. And we hope that today will help you to feel that we're reassuring you and giving you more confidence in these changes, and that we'll do it in a way that makes you think that we're with you in this and helping to make it a good and smooth transition. So just to remind us what we do as a church with weddings, we do weddings because we think marriage matters. We meet a lot of people because of weddings. In 2019, which was the last time we have data for, we did just under 30,000 weddings as the Church of England. That means we met a minimum of 60,000 people, a bride and a groom at each wedding, people whom we got to have a conversation with, to talk to get to know. That's an extraordinary privilege and a significant number. And alongside that, each of those weddings brought us in contact with a whole number of guests, of people often in the age groups of 20 to 45 who are guests at a wedding. And if we take a modest average of somewhere between 50, 75 guests at a wedding, in 2019, we would have had around 2 million people sitting in our churches, guests at a wedding, having an experience of the Church of England at work. Sadly, as we know, the last 15 months has seen that reach and that opportunity to engage with couples change dramatically. But we really hope and pray that as this year and next year unfolds, this will again become a very real, joyful possibility. But it is worth reminding ourselves that these days, only around 1 in 6, possibly even less now, weddings in England are Church of England weddings. So we have that privilege of doing this for a certain number of couples, but actually it is getting fewer and fewer each year. For the couples who come to us, there are certain things that stand out for them about the experience of being married in church. The first and rather interesting thing that we often forget is that, of course, we're celebrating their relationship, the journey they've been on to marriage, and also the journey they've been on that brings them to a church wedding in particular. Finding out why church is important in their lives, and often it's in surprisingly little ways. It might be that they went to a church school in the past. It might be that they've been to other good church weddings. It might be that they've just always thought this would be the thing that feels to them that would make the wedding real special and feel significant to them. They look for places that have meanings, and our churches have meaning in so many different ways, often full of history and story, all those couples who've been married in that place beforehand. We know too that couples value the words that we use, that they find significance in them, and that this day builds a whole lot of really special memories. And for many of them, this will be their first and most significant encounter with God and God's people through being married at church. We also know from research that we've done now a number of times in the last decade is that there are 3 really, really important moments for couples in a wedding. Walking in to the church, however they do that these days, with a parent or with someone else, they entering the church, that moment is very important in their memories. But the most important moment by a long way is the moment of exchanging vows. That's the moment that couples talk about afterwards. And the final one they talk about is that walking back down the aisle, going out as a married couple. And through these moments, we become part of their memories and their story. And nothing in these changes, nothing is changing those 3 moments. And as I was looking at it earlier today, again, thinking about it, it strikes me that in all the research we've done, it's never been a memorable moment for a couple. It's never been picked up that the memories are made in the paperwork. The memories are made in the relationships that we have, being there for them, and in the exchanging of the vows. We are still the people who solemnize the marriage. We are still the people who stand there at that special moment, who pronounce God's blessing on that couple. And that's of major importance to us. So, getting down to the process that we're now involved with, I'm going to take you through what it feels like to actually do this. Not that I know yet, but what does it feel like when it happens? And as Neil said, first things first, before anything else, yes, the existing registers will need to be closed. You will need to do a final quarterly return. And your existing registers, in due course, you'll hear from your local register office and you'll be told how to send them back. And you'll keep one copy in the safe for historic reasons. We appreciate that some of us have churches, and I used to have one myself, where I had historic records of marriages having taken place over a very, very long time. So a colleague in Hereford Diocese has written some particular prayers should you want to use them. They're rather lovely, actually, because they remind us that as we close a register, in it is represented the stories of so many families, so many couples, so much love. But also they give us an opportunity to pray for those who will be married going forward as well. So those will be up on the Church Support Hub website. As Neil has said, and as we cannot stress enough to you, the church preliminaries are exactly the same as they have ever been. There are no changes at all to the reading of banns, qualifying connections, none of that is changed. As we mentioned, where you have couples who go to get civil preliminaries, they will now have a marriage schedule that will be issued rather than the Superintendent Registrar's certificate. So, step one, connect with couples. Now, you've got two kinds of couples at the moment to think about. You've got the couples who are getting married this year, and you've got the couples who are coming in to book weddings, hopefully for the future. So meet them, contact them. And in the usual way you would do this, collect and review all the details that you need. All those things remain exactly the same. However, you can now talk to them about which parents they want to include, up to 4 parents. Now, this would be their father or their mother, but it could also be up to 2 step parents as well, instead of or as well as. So potentially you could have 4 parents for either the bride and groom. I think that's quite unlikely, but in theory it could happen if they wanted them all. A step parent has to be married to either the mother or the father. They have to be in that relationship. And you indicate that it's a step parent on the form when you fill it in brackets. Everything else is the same. You put deceased, you put retired, all those things that we've always learned how to do. They remain the same. So you talk to them about which parents they want to include. And for many, many couples, this will be a great, great joy, being able to include someone other or as well as their father in the form. That will become as something of a delight to them. And I know that already from talking to clergy who've started to take bookings using the new form, that people are thrilled that they can put their mother in, that they can do this slightly differently from how it's been in the past. So it's great to be part of that amazing change. We have a new welcome form available, which you download on the Church Support Hub, which is changed to reflect this particular change, that you can now enter into it those additional parent information. So that's simply the first step, whether it's a wedding that's already in the system or a wedding that you're booking for the future. There is no other different detail that you need. And then I always put step 2 in as what I call mind the gap, because from the time you book a wedding to the time the wedding happens, there can be quite a long time scale. So at least in the last while, that's often been very long as couples have had to postpone and move. So just keep in touch as you would, arrange the banns as you would have done, arrange the marriage prep, whatever else that you do in that process of between the wedding being booked and the day of the wedding happen. That all stays the same. Just before the wedding date, you will need to print off and complete the marriage document, or maybe you will want to check with them if they're doing civil preliminaries that they've got the marriage schedule or that you've got it. How do you get the marriage document? Hopefully you've all seen now the information with all the web links in that came through your archdeacons last week. So you can either download it and print it off. You can order from the GRO stationery pre-printed forms if that would work, and if you know colleagues who don't do Zoom, that might be helpful to tell them that. If you are using the free Church of England wedding administration software, the Life Events Diary, it can be completed digitally. Please note you do not register it digitally, but the form would be completed in the same way as the Life Events Register used to enable you to print off the register entry. So you can do it in those different ways. So you do that, or when I say you do that, Your parish administrator might do that if you're lucky enough to be blessed with one. The person who helps you, they will do that for you in the same way as they prepared a register. And just common sense would say, check the details at the rehearsal, which for many of us will have been good practice with the details that are going in the register as well. Make that final check. It looks like this. I know it's a bit difficult to see it on your screen at the moment, but just so you get a brief idea if you haven't looked at it already. The main and most dramatic difference is that it is portrait, not landscape. It's smaller. That actually might provide us a challenge in completing it if we're using handwriting. I think it will require some good handwriting for those of us who do it that way. Because of course you've got those boxes that allow you to put in potentially up to 4 parents. And then you will see spaces at the bottom for the signatures as well. So that is what the form looks like. It's very straightforward, very simple. There's nothing else on it that is different. Oh, there is one small difference, which you might like, which is that we no longer have to put in the age at the date of the wedding, which for lots of us has involved sums in the vestry beforehand. We only put the date of birth now. We don't have to calculate their age, just put their date of birth. Otherwise, same kind of information that we've always collected. So you've done that. We're now in step 4. We're at the service itself. So basically, you need to have the document ready for signing. That's whether it's the marriage document or a marriage schedule. You will now have it with you in the service. You only have one. You don't have duplicates, nothing else, one. You sign it with the couple and with their witnesses in the usual time and place as you have ever done in the service, whatever your particular way of conducting a service is. But you will only have one set of signatures. We are encouraged to be using registrar's ink, if at all possible, for doing this and to make it a moment. It's worth thinking about. It won't take as long, perhaps, as sometimes it has done in the past, but it will still look like that moment that often the photographer likes to take the picture at that point. So basically, it's the same. It's just once, and it's done in the same place in the service. Now, I've called this step 4.5 because it's a completely optional thing for you to do. Completely, totally optional. But if you feel that you would like to give the couple something, because you will not be giving them a certificate, if you would like to give them something as a memento, a souvenir from the day, then from Church House Publishing, there will be available this attractive card that is absolutely has no legal significance, but is rather lovely and has a prayer on it, which really cements the fact that this is a wedding that's taken place in a church. Now, also, if you didn't want to do that and you don't want to buy those, and if you're going to ask me how much they are, they're going to be £4.99 for a pack of 10. You can also print off from the GRO site an acknowledgement slip to give the couple on the day, which is just a much more sort of business-like kind of piece of paper that you could give them to say, today your wedding took place. But again, has no legal significance, and you're under no obligation to give them anything at all at this moment. So at this point, the couple are going to leave the church as they've always done and set off. You're now in the vestry. After they've gone, you're back there. You have 2 jobs to do. One immediately and one in the next 21 days. Your immediate job is to complete, you or your church warden will complete, the Register of Marriage Services. So if you've got weddings this year, you will need to get a new book called the Register of Marriage Services, available from Church House Publishing. You do not need to get this book until you've actually got weddings happening, but you do and will need one for every church. It cannot be done one per benefice. It's one for each church, just like our baptism registers, just like our burial registers, all of those, same kind of book. And that will be an historic record of the fact that a service took place. It is not signed. It is going, except by you, and then it goes away just as your other registers do. So you complete that. The other job you have to do that you're responsible for is that within 21 days of the wedding, the marriage document needs to be sent or got to the register office. Now, how do you do this? You do it by ordinary post. There is no obligation to do recorded delivery, first class, or anything else at all. The primary way of doing it will be to put it in an envelope and post it. You can, if you've got a parish perhaps that's near the register office, you can, if you want, go by hand and put it through the letterbox, hand it in. You can ask someone else to do it, but we're responsible. The person who takes the wedding is responsible. But there's many things we're responsible for, and we ask other people to help us to do them. So your parish administrator can be the person who puts it in the post. You can ask someone. You could ask someone like the best man, if you wanted, or the bride's mother, to say, would you like to be the person who posts this? But actually somehow you're going to be responsible for sending it. Now, lots of us get worried at this point and think, how do start worrying about whether the register office knows that weddings have taken place? And the answer to this is no, they don't, and they never have. They never have known whether a wedding is taking place in the church. Nothing has changed. Neither we nor the couple under any obligation at all. We do not need to be informing the register office of weddings that have taken place. All we have to do at this point is get that marriage document sent to them as soon as we can. And when the marriage document is received, then the marriage is registered. So after the day, which I could call the final step, except it's not you that does it, because the couple now have the responsibility to order and obtain and pay for their marriage certificate, not you. If you wanted to, you could possibly send them a card at that point, a congratulations card, just saying congratulations on your wedding, so that they know that they're reminding, perhaps, it might just act as a little prompt to them if they haven't done it, but I suspect they will. It's also really important to remember, for the couples that we meet now, this system is not a problem, because for most of them, it's the first time that they've encountered it. So we can just say with confidence, this is what they will do. They're used to doing many other bits of paperwork with coming up with their marriage, and this is one that they will become used to and familiar with. After that, it's up to you how you continue to build a relationship with a couple. This is nothing to do with registration, but if you want to, we know from our research that continuing the relationship with a couple, sending cards, being in touch with them, even inviting them to come back to church on their first anniversary and so on, helps them to feel connected to us, because we've been part of their story, this really big and important moment in their lives. I'm going to stop in a moment and deal with I'm sure there's lots of questions, but the Life Events Diary, just those of you that don't know about it, is our free online software for administering not just weddings, but funerals and baptisms of a child as well. And as I said earlier, if you use the Life Events Diary, the document is going to be embedded in that, so you'll be able to get it from there. I mentioned two other sites, the Church Print Hub, where you can order any of our printed resources from there, and the Church Support Hub, where we put all sorts of information, insights, ideas and downloads to do with weddings. For example, on here is the welcome form adapted to include all the parent details. On here, we will be putting up an FAQ after this webinar, taking you through this process. On here are the new fees tables, because no longer do we charge for the certificate, so we'll need to take that fee out. All of that has been done. If you aren't familiar with this website, it's a good place to go, and we'll be sharing all these links afterwards. So I think that brings us nicely to the time. We've got a lot of time for questions, and my guest, Tom, is with 2,000 plus people in the webinar. We have a great number of questions, so Neil and I are now available to answer those as they come through.
Yes, you are absolutely right. There has been an enormous number of questions. So yes, we've got over 2,100 people on today's webinar. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of questions, new ones coming in as we speak. First of all, does the marriage schedule replace the superintendent registrar's certificate for couples using civil preliminaries?
Yes, in simple, yeah, absolutely. So after the 4th of May, if a couple need a civil marriage preliminary, because generally speaking, one of them is a non currently non-UK or EEA national, they will have to have applied for a superintendent registrar's certificate, and instead of the certificate being issued, a marriage schedule will be issued, and that will be largely pre-populated by the registrar. That will be given to the couple as the superintendent registrar's certificate is currently, and they will be responsible for delivering that to the minister in advance of the wedding.
And Neil, I'm right, just to clarify, that is what will be signed then in the service, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's wonderful. So Neil, apart from one half being a non-resident, are there other circumstances in which now the couple would need to send off for the civil preliminaries?
Generally speaking, the only reason why a civil preliminary would be needed for a Church of England wedding is where one of the couple is an overseas national. There are other changes coming in July about how that works, but that's not really not so much for today. So, I mean, there are a limited number of circumstances in which a civil preliminary might be needed for couples who are both UK nationals, but generally speaking, yeah, it's only if one or both of them are foreign nationals.
That's wonderful. Lots of folks asking about the Life Events Diary and questions around that. If you want to sign up for the Life Events Diary, I will put a link in to the chat right now, along with the email address for the support team. There's a lot of questions coming in about the Life Events Diary. Some of them are quite detailed, and I don't think we've got a chance to go through that deeply today. There is training tutorial videos, but also they do have a support team. I've put that into the chat. So if you want to sign up for the Life Events Diary, the link is there. Just go there and click on register, fill out the form. And then obviously we've also got the help desk just there for you.
I'm going to say one thing, just to clarify for people. I picked this up 1-2 places. You can't just use the Life Events Diary to print off a blank document. If you just want to use a blank document, then you go and get it off the other website. But what it does is allow you to gather all the information that you've got in one place and manage it going forward. So just to make that clear, it's not the site you go to just to print off a marriage document.
Let's go from digital to paper-based here. Should we be using archival paper or special ink for printing, filling in the marriage document? Can we print the marriage document on posh paper for signing at the wedding?
Great question, and I've heard this answered by GRO as well. You can print it on whatever kind of paper you like. Posh paper would be nice if you had some, of course, but it really doesn't, they don't take it away with them, so it doesn't matter. It can be printed on ordinary paper. They suggest that where we can, we use registrar's ink, which would be good practice because we try and make the signing done with a nice pen and all of those kind of things, because that helps, obviously. But other than that, that's all the guidance we have. I don't think there's anything else on that, Neil, is there?
No, absolutely. There's no other guidance been issued yet on that.
Is there an option for churches to record marriage services that take place in their buildings in a digital format, including fill and print? Or do they have to use the soon-to-be published Register of Service of Marriage Services and complete them by hand? There's a lot of questions around this because an understanding that everything was moving digitally. So I wondered if we could just absolutely clarify, do we have to do a paper-based version in addition to anything electronic? And indeed, the other way around. Is there not an electronic version that entirely replaces paper-based, ink-based, and we do away with these Word documents, etc., altogether?
The answer at the moment is no. There is in the legislation provision which is described by the GRO as future-proofing, to allow a situation where a marriage document could be produced wholly online and lodged electronically, but that process is not yet in place. So the marriage document and the marriage schedule do both need to be produced in and printed off and signed manually, and manually at the moment delivered to the register office within 21 days of the wedding.
Yes, and as far as that's the, if you like, the legal thing about the marriage document. The Register of Services, which is another legal requirement, but it's through canon law, if you like. There's a very interesting question about the electronic registration of marriage services from the church's point of view. And I'll just say we have to come back to you on that, because I do know that there have been trials going on in different places about the electronic registration of services per se. So I'd need to go and talk into that particular team and find out how we're going and where weddings come in. All I know that all that we do and discuss with legal is that this has been the book that has been provided for now. I know also that if you didn't want to have, there are provisions, and we've got this in the FAQ, for doing it without buying the new book. You can just get another form of book and do it properly, as long as you record all the right sort of information. So we've got some answers around that up on our FAQs. But look out for, I will double check with those who are working on the idea of services that can be electronically registered, and we'll see whether we can update you on that.
Thank you very much. We've gone way past 500 questions so far. So we've got a lot of questions coming in about the numbering system on the marriage document, that reference box. Yeah. Is that meant to be a benefice number or a parish number? Is that an individual person's number? Do we just make it up? Can you just offer clarification on that? Because we've got a lot of people asking about that.
Absolutely. It's a really good question. And it was asked of GRO last week. And my understanding is at this point is that it's literally, you start at number 1. You could call it, just one, and you could match that with 1 in your new marriage of services, and the next one you do is 2. It's as simple as that. It isn't any kind of long-term big system. It's just so that there's some number on there at all. That was what we were told in the Q&A last week. Did you have anything else on that, Neil?
No, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I imagine that it will actually assist the GRO, because if they get if they get a marriage, half a dozen marriage documents from the same parish, and they've got numbers 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, and 9, it might give them cause to inquire about where 4, 5, and 6 have got to. So
you might call it something like 121, and then next year will be 122. When we go into the next year, that kind of system, really. But it is definitely not. It's for you to do it. Yeah.
Excellent. There we go. We're about to pass. Yes. Gone past 600 questions. We're getting through them as best we can, folks, but there are a lot of duplicates out there. We're going to keep a record of all these questions. We'll be putting them on the site. That's in the chat for you to get through. Couples sometimes go away on honeymoon immediately after the wedding, and often they need the wedding certificate to take with them. So what do they do? How do they prove that they are married with this new system in place?
Neil, do you want to have a go at that one?
That is one of the challenges of a new system. But as I say, I mean, this system is not, it's new to England and Wales, but it is the system that has been used in Scotland since 1852. So it is a potential problem. The marriage document has to be lodged with the registrar office before a marriage certificate can be issued. So in terms of official documentation, in terms of the marriage certificate, that is potentially problematic. It doesn't prevent couples from applying, as they can currently, to the passport office for a passport in a married name in advance of a wedding. So that may be a potential solution if either of the couple are proposing to change their names following their marriage.
And also, I think we talked with GRO. If you've given them either the attractive card or the acknowledgement slip that says the wedding has taken place, that is also a helpful thing that they could have on that day if they literally going away that night. I also know that it is possible for a couple who maybe obviously not flying that night or something, but are really anxious about it and they're really going to need their certificate urgently. They can pre-book an appointment to go in person and pick it up in the next week or so. So I know that is also possible. But I think they don't want that to be happening a great deal. And as you say, the system has been running in Scotland for a long time and doesn't seem to pick up any real issues around this.
The other thing that I think, and it's very much off the back of what you've just said there, Sandra, really in response to what you've just said, that this is a statutory change affecting everyone who conducts weddings, including registrars. And so I think this is something to say that this is something that isn't just going to be affecting us. And so these sorts of changes and these sorts of things have been considered. It's not a C of E rollout. This is a national change. And it's the same with the timetable, of course, that we're working to GRO's timetable, which is dictated by the legislation, not by a C of E rollout of these measures. So some people are getting quite concerned around security and fraud, around protections of this document. If this is just a Word file that could just be printed off and there's no one to alert the GR ahead of time, nor confirmation afterwards, how are we going to protect against marriage fraud?
Neil.
Well, I mean that is a potential issue. Ultimately, the registration of marriages is the responsibility of the GRO, whose system this is. I think if GRO have said that if a marriage document is lodged with them about which they have concerns, they will liaise with the member of the clergy whose name is down on the form as having conducted the wedding to confirm that that wedding was indeed conducted by them. But yes, I mean, I think the system is perhaps not as secure as it could be, but registration, as I say, is the issue. It is the issue of the GRO, not the Church of England or indeed anywhere else where weddings can take place. So yeah, it's their issue.
Yeah, and the GRO, you know, we've sat through their Q&A sessions. The GRO are confident as they can be, and again they draw on the experience in Scotland as well, as you say, where this has also been happening for a long time, to give them the confidence. And it's good to be reminded it is that's their responsibility as well. We do always keep our data, obviously, of course, you must, in the parish as safe as you can.
Thank you so much. We're getting quite a lot of interest, Sandra, in the, if you like, informal marriage certificate, the informal part being the certificate, not the marriage.
Not the certificate, Tom.
Not the certificate. When will that be available and from where, please?
I call it the Pretty Souvenir. That's not its official title, but that's what I refer to it in my head as the Pretty Souvenir card. Will be available through Church House Publishing, and they are hopeful that the link to it will be up by the end of today to start ordering. So they will be available. It's ready to go. It's just getting everything in place to be up on their website. So it will be through Church House Publishing. We will have a black and white version, which isn't nearly as pretty as well, which could be downloaded as well.
Thank you. I want to turn now to a question or a number of questions, if I may, about recording parents and all the different ways of doing that. This has been something that we've had a lot of questions about in many different forms. So if you'll continue to ask that question, just pause typing. Hopefully Sandra and Neil will be able to answer that because we're well over 700 questions now. Let's see if we can get some of these answered. So there's lots of questions coming in about the recording of parents and all the different ways of being able to do that. Can step parents who are civil partnered to be a parent, to be included as a parent? Can biological, foster and adoptive parents be identified? Is it possible that you could have up to 4 parents recorded for each the bride and the groom? What if people want to include birth parents alongside adoptive parents? And do you need to differentiate in some annotation? And can you only have step parents if they're married, but also can you only have step parents and not parents if you are having step parents included? There's a lot of confusion and concern around this. Perhaps you could just give us some of the rules and regulations around parents.
How you fix, Neil?
Okay, going back to the pre 4th of May times, it's true to say that a stepfather was only able to be recorded where they had been married to the birth mother, and you do have to identify them as a stepfather, and that I think will not change. Similarly, if you are recording adoptive parents as well as birth parents, or then I think you would need to identify who is who. In terms of whether somebody who is civilly partnered to a birth parent, then yes, they could be recorded as a further step parent. But I think we are going to need to wait and see what the guidebook to the clergy says on those points, which, as I say, we are hopeful. We're confident, or we've been promised that guidebook will be updated and issued any time now, really.
There's also been a couple of Q&A sessions with GRO, and there's the recordings of those sessions on their website as well. And this has been asked of them too. And I know that they have said, you know, a step parent is married, just as you've just said, Neil, in the same way as before. It is optional. You know, you can, I definitely know they answered that. So you could put either a father or a mother, you know, and you don't have to put any, just as you don't now. If you don't want to, you actually don't put any at all. So that sort of principle is still there. But Neil is right. The actual detail of defining these we need to check in the document or on their site. Is there? I think the essence of this is about the mothers and being recorded as well as fathers. Lots of the other detail of how we do that remains the same definitions that have always been there. They haven't changed those at all, but they have made this additional possibility of being able to include step parents. And so in theory, you could have 4 per person, per party, that's the word, per party to the marriage. You could have up to 4, and our forms allow space for that. How often that will happen, I wouldn't like to say, but in theory, you could.
Thank you very much. To everyone asking about post, I am coming to it right now. Sandra, Neil, the postal service can sometimes be unreliable. What provision is there around protecting the postage of these documents? Do we need to email the registry to let them know the form's coming? Do we have to send them by recorded delivery or some kind of tracked method? Could you just unpack that for us, please?
Yes, Tom, I'm sure Neil will say a little bit more, but I've listened. This has been asked so much of GRO all the way through, and the answer has been very, very clear every time. You just put it in the post. They are not concerned that we do recorded track. You can if you want. If you're worried, you can do that. But you don't have to. They're absolutely clear. Second class post, first class post, whatever you want to do is absolutely fine. In the same way, you don't have to do recorded delivery for your quarterly returns at the moment or anything. You just put them in the post to the registered office. You don't ring them, you don't have to check. And they trust the postal system. They trust the postal system. And that is actually the heart of the answer, really. Neil, do you think that's fair?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what they have said. They were also asked a direct question about whether or not duplicates of the marriage document ought to be retained until that you know that the marriage has been registered. The GRO's very clear answer to that was that a duplicate of a marriage document should not be retained.
Thank you. You can imagine there's been a reaction to that answer, but again, I think our same advice applies, that this is a statutory change and it's affecting everyone who conducts registers. Everyone who conducts weddings, including registrars. So, will the wedding fees be changing, Sandra?
The only change, Tom, the only change is that we will obviously no longer charge around the wedding certificate. That's the only change. It's a tiny. Should you be marrying anybody this weekend, you are marrying them under the current system and you will charge for them. So there's a slightly little complex thing which will change completely on the 4th when we will take that note down. But from the 4th of May, the only change is literally that detail about the issuing of certificate. And I'll just add something on that, which also means, can I say, that going forward, you won't issue replica certificates either. You won't issue them, not even for historic weddings. They will all come from the Register Office. I think that's right, Neil, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because you're amongst the other documents that you'll be required to return to the Superintendent Registrar is any unused stock of marriage certificates.
Thank you very, very much, both of you. It's incredibly busy. Again, reactions obviously to some of the answers that have been given. We are noting all of today's questions. Today's questions will be noted. Many of them will be answered in the new guidebook, but also will also be on the FAQs. So how long after the wedding can we say that the marriage certificate will be available to couples? Have the Registrar's Office said anything on that at this stage, please?
I believe that they've said that a marriage certificate will be available within 24 hours of the lodgement of the marriage document.
Thank you very much indeed. Will each church in our team need a marriage register, or would we only need one for the whole team? How does that work, please?
No, each church will need one eventually. If a wedding, obviously, if no wedding takes place, you won't need to get one. But if a wedding is taking place, each church will need to keep the register of services in due course. Yes, and we've got an answer and explanation as to why that is on the website as well.
Thank you very much. Someone has asked, where are the FAQs that we keep talking about? Do please check the chat. We've put them in there throughout today's session. So do go and check the chat. So if we had a couple who was getting married by special license in July, due to not being qualifying, as I understand it, they would need a wedding schedule because of this license. Is that correct? And if they are correct, will the Faculty Office issue the wedding schedule? No, I can see shaking of heads. Perhaps you can for us.
This is your special world, the Faculty Office.
Yeah, the Archbishop's special license is an ecclesiastical preliminary, and so along with banns and common license, any wedding that takes place after the calling of banns or by common license or by Archbishop's special license will be recorded on a marriage document. The marriage schedule is only used where the wedding is preceded by a civil marriage preliminary.
So if we use the type and print marriage document, can we go on to 2 sheets of A4 if we need the space for couples with, say, 4 parents each, and then 6 witnesses, for instance? Is that allowable?
Very good question. I think that's one, I haven't heard the GRO answer that one particularly. Have you, Neil?
I haven't, but I have to assume that if their type and print version allows the document to go onto more than a single A4 sheet,
Must be okay.
they will have to accept it.
Yeah. I think we have tried though to keep the one that which has been approved by GRO as one sheet. And certainly not having, I agree with you. If it can be expanded, then it must be acceptable. But if it can't, then no, it's not.
Thank you very much. We've just mentioned the marriage schedule. Where is that available to download? How do we get this, please?
You do not download a marriage schedule. The marriage schedule is issued as a civil preliminary. When a couple have had to go to the registry office beforehand, they will be given it there and bring it to you. Is that right, Neil?
Absolutely, in exactly the same way that they do currently with the Superintendent Registrar's certificate. That is issued by so the marriage schedule will be issued by the Superintendent Registrar, and the couple will deliver it to you before you conduct the wedding.
Thank you. That's useful. Just some ambiguity there, and just unpacking that a little bit is very helpful. So could you just clarify for us again the requirements around whether we need to be notifying the registry office of forthcoming marriages? Because the GRO training said not to, and I think earlier you mentioned that as well. County Council and their diocese are saying that they must. This is for marriages by bands and common license, not the SRC. Could you just clarify that for us, just because of that sort of slight confusion there, please?
So there is absolutely no requirement in the regulations or the Act for Church of England clergy to give advance notice of any marriage that they are conducting after ecclesiastical preliminaries in their church. So the local superintendent registrar may seek to obtain that information from you, but there is absolutely no obligation, there's no legal obligation to provide advance notice of any marriage that you conduct after Church of England preliminaries. Thank
you. That's really useful. Sandra, as you've been aware, we've had a huge number of people on today's webinar, and many of people are expressing their thanks both to you, Sandra, and Neil. Thank you again so much. People are so grateful for what you've offered here. We've got over 800 questions now. The team will take some time to digest those and be updating the FAQs. Sandra, if I'll take my leave and have you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom, for managing that so very well. And thank you, Neil, as well. We're always available for you to contact directly if you have any questions, but please do use your local registrar and use your archdeacon as well to ask questions locally. Let me just say a final prayer for us as we go on our day today and into the season, hopefully, of being able to celebrate with couples again as they begin a life together. Lord God, thank you. Thank you that you're with us in the small details, the difficult challenges we face. Thank you that you're with us in these times of change. Help us to walk alongside couples, to celebrate with them as we meet them through their weddings, and give us peace of mind as we work through this new system. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. Thank you, and have a good day.